everyone, welcome back to the Sports Psych Show. Today I have the pleasure and the honour of speaking with Richard Shorter, aka Non-Perfect Dad. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dan. Well, mate, I'm absolutely chuffed to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation over the next hour or so as we kind of get into working with parents, I guess.
Absolutely. No, well, we've been trying to do it for some time. Non-Perfect Dad. So where did that come from? Where did the name come from? What got you into, what got you fascinated in sport parenting?
Well, firstly, I've got 3 kids, and if I had in any way attempted to give myself a title that aimed at any kind of expert on the parent engagement, they would have pulled me down. In fact, my own children say to me regularly, how can you talk to other parents? You're a rubbish dad, especially the youngest. She quite enjoys that. So that's kind of part of the reason. The other part of the reason is I looked at parenting coaches, parent engagement, and not just in sport, across the whole spectrum. And there just seemed to be lots of photos of perfect families on perfect holidays and perfect people. And I just thought, that's fine, but I can't with any authenticity present that. And also, having spent 20 years working with parents, I realised how suspicious parents were of that as well. So I wanted just straight away for parents to get a little bit of a flavour as to who I am. And I just thought, non-perfect dad. Some people might be looking for perfection, but I reckon most parents get that it isn't perfect. And so I was hoping that would connect quickly with parents. I've spent 20 years, Dan, starting with working with young people. My first degree is in youth and community work and community activism. And I had this great privilege of running a skate park in my early 20s, which I think makes me cool. My kids don't think that makes me cool at all. And I noticed, because I was, as a young 20-year-old, fresh out of university, got this huge grant at the church I was working for at the time to run a skate park. We were working with some incredible kids. I noticed that kids went home. And there was me kind of trying to help these kids with self-identity, self-worth, helping them move forward, helping them make positive choices, and noticed very, very quickly that they could spend hours with us in the skate park and then go home. And then the home narrative was so powerful and impacting on a young person's life that, yes, look, we were good youth workers, we ran a really good project I'm really proud of, but it wasn't having a deep impact with young people. And so from that point on, I started to ask the question, even though my first love would be doing youth work, what would it look like if we started to shape the lives of young people, parents? What would it look like if we start to explore impact in the lives of young people's parents? So I started to explore that more. Along that journey, I got ordained as a Baptist minister, so I now work in quite a deprived council estate called Harold Hill in East London, which is part of Romford in Essex. And both in Southend, where we were, and in Romford, I've done a lot of work with the local authority, partnering with them, delivering their parent engagement, particularly working with dads. So how did I get into sport? Well, where we live, it isn't a full-time church minister job, so I wanted to start something part-time, and parenting seemed to be the most natural thing, as I gathered quite a lot of experience in that. And to be honest with you, even though I've loved my sport and I coached a lot of hockey as a young adult, and then played a lot of sport, and all my kids love their sport, I hadn't really thought about kids in sport until I bumped into someone who made the suggestion. So I ran a few bits at my local sports club, and they got good reputation, and one set of contacts led to another, and I now have this just ridiculous, I pinch myself, I really, really do. I just have this privilege to go into lots of sporting institutions that, as a fan, I absolutely love, to support their parent engagement, to help those institutions with an overall parent engagement strategy, how to do it well. I'm not there to kind of take the roles of psychologists and things like that. What I think I'm there to do is to try and help bridge a perceived gap that is between the kind of professionals who work for sports institutions, coaches, clubs, sports psych, S&Cs, physios, etc., and parent engagement. And I also do that for independent schools. And as well as that, I deliver the parent engagement sessions in a non-perfect dad way, which I like to think is high on engagement, also high on content, to enable parents to be very reflective on their parenting approach. So I have the privilege of doing that. Let me name drop for a few minutes. I do that for England Rugby, England Hockey, England Cricket, half the rugby premiership sides, and a number of independent schools around the country and a couple of county cricket clubs. So I love it. I absolutely love it. It has me all over the place, but I love it.
Wow, your phone book must be the envy of those out there trying to contact coaches and some of the leading people in the coaching industry. So you've picked up a lot of experience working with parents, engaging parents in and out of sport, and you've written a book.
Yes, Conversations for the Journey, 40 ways for you to build sporting character. I think if there's one thing I think that is a real gift from home is character. And by character, we might talk about kind of mindset or mental skills, etc. But I think in kind of everyday speak, it's character. and I'm passionate about helping parents realise that they're already developing those things. That's what they're already doing. They're already doing that when they have a row. They're already doing that when they think about how to select options for GCSEs. They're already doing that in the way that they approach going to training or getting out of school. Parents are already teaching mental skills to their children just by the way in which they're interacting. And what I wanted to do is say, you're doing that, I know you're doing that, but let's have a moment of reflection to think about what are you doing, and then actually let's ask some questions which might be building those character traits that you really want to work on. So in one of my talks, I ask what I call the barbecue question. And so I ask parents at your child's 40th birthday barbecue, how do you want their life described? And sort of 95% of the time they will pick up character traits. So I want them to be kind, hardworking, generous, fun, good dad, a good partner, a good son. So what I find fascinating is, for me, that blows out of the water the whole myth that all parents want their children to do is win World Cups and play and earn lots of money. Occasionally those things come up, and I actually think parents can hold both those things together. But for me, it challenges that caricature that parents just want sporting success. I think that's okay. My kids play sport, and I want them to have sporting success. I might define success a bit broader than others do, but I also want them to be really good people. And so I say to parents that you want your kids to be really good people. Fascinatingly, I ask coaches a similar question. I say to coaches, imagine this, you're in a bar, and someone comes up to you and says, hey, I now coach Robert. You used to coach Robert at junior level, didn't you? Can I just tell you about Robert as an athlete now? And I say to coaches, what kind of words do you want your athlete's future coach to describe them by? And do you know what, Dan? Very, very rarely are they sport-specific words. Almost exclusively are they character or mindset or mental skill-orientated words. Hardworking, good learner, adaptable, teachable, committed, friendly, open, honest, courageous, kind of humble. What all these kind of words, I think, like, right, okay, so coaches are saying this and parents are saying this. There's a lot of common ground here. So I wanted to produce a book that offered parents 40 ways to have conversations around those, what you and I might call mental skills, but I think I try and contextualize it to parents and talk about character that move away from did you win, did you score, were you player of the match? Which are cheap questions, really, but they're asked because their parents are in a rhythm of it, and also parents they're easy questions to ask because they're the questions society asks on the back pages of sports papers.
Well, as you said, the book is entitled "Conversations for the Journey." And you've used this word question, asking a question. And I've found in my work with parents, with coaches, is that we tend to be so socialised as in that adult-child or that parent-son-daughter relationship. I suppose because the perception of power lies with the adult, we're so socialised into this notion of we have to make statements. We have to tell our child, or we have to tell the young player or the son, the daughter, how it is, what the answer is, how it should be, and what we perhaps learnt growing up from our significant elders. I kind of feel that we're so socialised into making statements, but you've written a book about asking questions.
Yeah, and I think, well, mate, for precisely that reason. I mean, I think I say one of the things that this book will give you is it gives your child a voice. And I think most experts seem to be agreed that if we can give children a voice in this process, they'll stay within that sport, whether they're playing for England or the local third 11 side, they'll stay in that sport for far longer if they're enjoying it. And I recognise, again, enjoyment is a broad spectrum word, but the reality is I want to give my kids a voice. Secondly, child development is a really confusing thing. I mean, I've got 3 kids, and it's like apps on your phone. You know, you wake up in the morning, you find the developers updated the app, and it updates the app on your phone. It's changed the colour, and they've changed where your favourite parts on the app are, and you get really, really frustrated. It's a bit like that having kids. They wake up in the morning, and they've developed. And sometimes, because children can regress in their development as well under stress and things like that, they deinstall the update and reinstall a version that they had 2 or 3 weeks ago. So parenting it is not easy always to perceive exactly where your child is at in their development. And I think questions are a far healthier way of enabling your child to develop and to you to support that development. Because, and one of the things I say in the book is, don't just ask these questions once. So, some of these questions are kind of asked once a month. Some of them are asked once a year. But because development, mood, habits, rhythms change, you know, particularly going through puberty. I mean, all the changes that go on through a young person through puberty. You ask a girl a question when she's on a menstrual cycle and when she's not, you could get different answers to that depending on how impacting that is for her. So I think for me, I've recognised in my own parenting, look, I can be a bit of a speech-giving dad if my head's not in the right place, and actually I can just, and we joke about that as a kids. I was like, kids, like, can you just pretend to listen? Dad needs to give a speech to get something off his chest, and then you can carry on doing what you want to do. So we tell that, but I find questions are far, far more enriching, and even if they don't answer that question at that moment, they might come back later and say. They might give you an answer. They won't say, that question you asked earlier. They'll just blurt out an answer to a question you asked half an hour ago if you can't remember it. But it's facilitating a growth opportunity in that. And that sometimes might end down by you making a statement as a parent. You know, you might kind of solidify what they're trying to say. So I think you're saying that the way you treated the ref was unhelpful today. Is that a fair summary? You know, so I think as parents, we can coach that conversation to a conclusion and can ask a closed question. I don't believe in just always asking open questions. I think sometimes it's good to have a conclusion and to focus, try and get people to agree with what they're trying to say or not. But I think to start with, lots of open questions. These are 40 open questions that are primarily designed to help the car journey facilitate development around the sports pitch and to start getting their mind into that place where they can go and perform and, more importantly, go and enjoy it. Most of the questions are on the way. People often think, this is a great book for after the game. No, actually, I think after the game, to be honest with you, they mostly want to put their headphones on and they're knackered. They've just played sport. So there are a few questions for after the game. But those are more to do with if it's a bit ugly and they're in pain and how you handle that pain. The majority, I think, are on the way to get them in the right place and to develop.
I love a couple of terms you used there. Gives your child a voice, facilitates a growth opportunity. And as you're speaking there as a sports psychologist, I'm thinking of that classic sort of self-determination theory, you know, autonomy, mastery, relatedness, certainly the autonomy piece there, you know, giving your child autonomy to reflect, problem solve, find solutions. It's giving them the opportunity to find what they love about the game and stay in the game that they're playing, competing. It's helping them, as you say, grow from a cognitive, sorry for that horrendous psychological term, but from
it's cool.
Helping them grow from a cognitive, a thinking perspective, as I say, a problem solving, a solution finding perspective. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, like, so my youngest is a gymnast, and gym is an interesting sport. I mean, she's not in an elite pathway. She's part of an acro squad. I mean, I've shown my complete naivety. It's 3 of them, and because she's a little list, the other 2 chuck her in the air and throw her up and down. And my daughter will sometimes come over with bruises laughing because someone dropped her tonight, which I think is a little bit weird, but she loves it. But she went through a phase of, you know, to be a gymnast, you have to do lots of stretching, and it's quite painful stretching, a lot of core work and things like that. And she used to come home in tears, and some of the tears were about she couldn't do it. She's a little bit of a perfectionist. I think we as parents are perfectionists, and we've kind of had that on, and I think she's also a little bit of a perfectionist. I'm not afraid of a perfectionist mindset. I think some people seem to see it as awful. I think it can have strengths. But, you know, the first thing is, do you want not the first thing, but, part of the conversation, you come home crying a few times, do you want to stop? Because, I'm not paying a lot of money for you to come home crying all the time if you're not enjoying it. But she didn't want to stop. So what we did, I said to her, how does it feel when you do a competition? How does it feel when you won that medal? How did it feel as such out of 10? Now, because she likes to argue with me, she's a nonconformist, just like her dad is. So instead of saying 10 out of 10, she kind of rather snarkily went 7 out of 10. Okay, so that's a 7 out of 10 feeling. I said, okay then. So I went and bought some white wristbands, and I sewed a 7 into the wristbands, and I gave her the 7 wristbands. And basically I said, Anya, my challenge to you is how can you do something tonight at gym that's going to help you get that 7 feeling again? So it might be stretching, and that might be painful. It might not feel like a 7 when you stretch, but is doing the stretching going to help you feel a 7 again? And, she only wore those wristbands for 3 weeks, mate. But it stopped the crying, and she still loves it. And for me, it was like, well, just trying to explore with her how she feels. I don't know if that was a good or a bad thing to do, but it worked for us at that time. And trying to get her to visualise that, actually, I'm not just doing this for the now, I'm doing this for the future, and giving her a little bit ownership over that score. So even now, we still talk about 7 out of 10 feeling. How might you nudge yourself forward so you can get that 7 out of 10 feeling again? Not worry about getting the medal, but about that joy of being in competitive environment.
I love it. It's classic solution-focused brief therapy, which for everybody listening in, I can't remember what episode it was, but I spoke to Paul Z. Jackson, who's a solution-focused brief therapist, and it's a great episode to listen to advertise my own podcast on my podcast. But
Paul Z. Jackson.
Paul Z. Jackson. It's a solution-focused brief therapy. What you've talked about there is using basic scaling to help people cut emotional. There's lots of reasons to use scaling, but one of the things it does is it cuts emotion away from the activity you're speaking about and helps people compartmentalize their behaviours and actions and what's happening in their life. But what we also know from what you said there, Richard, is that your daughter is high conscientious and possibly low agreeable, which she's going to be a hell of a competitor when she grows up, because when you're high conscientious, that's the sort of very high conscientiousness from a maladaptive perspective could be deemed to be perfectionism. But as you quite rightly mention, there's a flip side to that, which is high conscientiousness, which is you get stuff done, you do it in a very precise way, and those people are high achievers. The low agreeableness is you're competitive, you want to do well, you want to climb within your social hierarchy. So other than psychologizing your daughter there, we'll move on.
No, it's good to hear. It's good to hear. I won't tell her they're good attitudes when she's being non-compliant. But what was it? How do you describe that?
It's high conscientiousness and low agreeableness. And yes, it absolutely is one of the 6 aspects of agreeableness. Low agreeableness is non-compliance. High agreeableness is compliance. And it's just it's a really important thing to say, because you mentioned perfectionism and you said, well, I don't think it's all that bad. Well, actually, people get to a certain achieve things in life because they might display perfectionist tendencies, but flexibility, what I do as a sports psychologist in part, is help people recognise when that perfectionism becomes maladaptive and actually fails to help them or atrophies their performance, if you like.
Well, one of the things I try and help parents do, and I'm going to do a bit more on this, is and I think for me this is where the sports industry could be helping parents more about coaching parents around what's going on. So we talk about character traits and mindsets, but bear in mind most parents are likely to have got those from their parents. So I've got a friend, and her dad has been an awful, I might even use the word abusive father throughout her entire life. But she has some similar character traits to her dad, and we were kind of having this conversation, and like she is just really, really frightened by the fact that her dad was a bit of a pioneer, willing to try new things, quite stubborn. So it's probably similar to Anya. But my friend is like panicking that she's going to land up like her dad. And I'm saying, no, wait, listen. No character trait is necessarily a bad thing. It's just that every character trait turned up too loud, like when you listen to music on your headphones, it distorts. And in your dad, his character traits turned up so loud he became abusive. But that your dad had the opportunity to be a great dad with those character traits in a more healthy perspective and balance with the rest of, and the rest of himself and how he related to human beings. And I think trying to help parents see that no character trait that they hand on is necessarily bad, but actually helping their kids get the best out of that character trait in connection with each other and their coaches is a really, really important thing. Because otherwise we'll end up labeling certain attitudes as unhelpful or helpful, like perfectionism. And like you say, and you see Anya do her times tables, colouring or gymnastics. She really cares where everything goes. Oh, I think that's a great trait. I never cared.
Yes. Yeah.
so I can see how it's good. She doesn't get it from me.
Fair enough. No, yeah, absolutely. I love what you said there about a character trait being loud. I use the term volume. Actually, turn down the volume or turn up the volume. So when I work with sports people, and obviously neuroticism, which is negative emotion, but it can play a big part. And I just refer to turning down the volume of negative emotion or neuroticism, and just helping people. I love what you say, Richard, because it's helping people understand that whilst they might have a predominance in one type of character trait, like you might naturally be high conscientious, as an example, and so crossing the T's and dotting the I's feels really comfortable to you, and giving in that piece of work, you don't want to give it in until you've checked it over 50 times. That's what feels comfortable for you, but ultimately you have to understand, so that's a good thing, but ultimately you have to understand that you do actually have to hand that piece of work in eventually, so you can't keep being, you can't stay stuck in that mode. And that's what happens to people in life. It's when they get stuck in a certain mode and they don't have that flexibility and adaptability to turn up or down the volume, to turn down that volume from loud to quiet. That's where people become unstuck, if you like.
Totally. And I think if you think about parents on the sideline or parents in the car journey, to kind of go back to the book or whatever, I think we see is a highly emotive environment, and what we see is I think with sports teams are getting their heads around this now. But if we aren't controlling the environments, controlling is an interesting word, but if we're not shaping that environment so that which recognises those emotions and enables parents to hold a healthier middle ground. So I'm not a big fan of like silent sidelines and things like that. Fair enough, people can make them. I mean, interested in gymnastics, you have to be silent, and it's such a toxic environment watching a gymnastics competition because all the parents are silent because that's what the rules say, but they've all got this coded signalling going on and an intense stare that is just like if I was a child doing gymnastics under that intense stare of parents, I mean, so even without volume, you can still very loudly portray these character traits, and there are that are turned up into a noisy, distorting, unhelpful way. And if we can help parents hear the voice of their child, I mean, I genuinely think that the voice of a child is very, very powerful in a parent's ear. I know when my own children have told me off about something, that even if I've been defensive about that in the initial place, when I've stopped and paused and thought about it, I thought, actually, crumbs, yeah, they've got a point there. And so if we can be getting parents to ask questions of their children, they can reflect back. So like one section of the book is on like enhancing sideline support, and it's just talking about mannerisms. Like, can you role model to me what my mannerisms, what I look like when I'm unhappy or happy? And I think that's when my own kids did that to me, it's really, really powerful. And listen, you've got to have a lot of humility. You've got to be able to laugh at yourself to be able to do this, because to have your child stand there and show you what you look like when you're cross or when you're angry or when you're pensive or whatever, but when your children reflect that back to you, that's really powerful and makes you think, actually, I'm not going to stand with my hands in my pocket, or I'm not going to be on my phone, or I'm not going to go and stand behind the goal line. So I go and stand behind the posts. My son's a rugby player. I stand behind the opposition posts because he's fullback, and he thought I was standing behind his team's opposition, his post, so I could be closer to him. And he's like, Dad, why'd you try to get so close to me? I was like, I'm not getting close to you, man. I'm getting away from all the parents who do my head in, and you can see the game, better. But he thought I was coming there to interrogate him and be close to him. So I was like, listen, what if I went to the other end where you're running towards? Is that okay? Oh, yeah, that's fine. I was like, well, this is because it was nothing to do with you. But he interpreted my behaviour as a criticism of him, even though I very rarely criticise him about his sport. Only if he's really rude to the umpire or opposition do we have a proper chat about stuff. Most of the time it's just trying to playful help him think about how he's learned. So I think if we can get parents in those environments thinking about how they can hold those things in the middle. Like, it is okay for your child. It is okay for you to want your child to play for a Premiership rugby or football team or win a World Cup. That's an okay dream. I'm so concerned that so much of the rhetoric about it's just about fun, it is like denying a human instinct to want to see your child thrive. I want to see my child thrive, but at the same time, I don't think that should diminish their fun or their ability or my pride of them if they just play for the local third team and never kind of get beyond that. So there's some tensions there that just need support around that, rather than trying to deny that they exist. Let's be a bit more honest. And I think if by being honest, we can help parents manage those challenges. And I think the questions to allow the child voice really can help that.
Well, lovely segue there to talk in a bit more detail about the book. There's 8 sections, essentially 8 sections to the book.
Yep.
The big 4: deepening the parent-child relationship, enhancing sideline support, which you mentioned, big picture questions, giving a positive understanding of self, nurturing a great team member, building self-awareness, and questions to pose on the way home. So what I thought we'd do, I've been through this book and it's absolutely brilliant. And I must say, Richard, it's not just for parents, it's for coaches as well. Because these kind of questions, I think the more you read these types of books, this book especially, but these types of books that are very much centre on the art of asking questions, or you might say the craft of asking questions, the better you become at doing so, because it really is a skill, isn't it? So what I thought I'd do, what I've done is, from reading it, I've just noted down a specific question from each section, but I'm sure we'll have a bigger chat about each section as we go through. So that first section is the big 4, which is obviously sort of the big 4 questions you might ask, or the big 4 topic areas that you deem to be the most important. And actually just pausing on question number 1 here. What do you want from me on training day? What do you want from me on game day? What do you want from me on training day? And I pinpointed this question. It's your first one, because I just love the notion, again, of that power relationship. I'm bringing myself, in essence, as the adult, I'm bringing myself down closer towards the child and giving that child the power to say, well, I'm in charge, I'm in control, I can tell you, and I think I'm interpreting this right, and please come back at me if you feel I'm wrong here, but I, as a child, have autonomy to say, Mum, Dad, this is what I'd like from you on game or training day.
Mate, that is totally. And in fact, I'd say to parents in my presentations, or if they buy the book, if they throw every other page out, please, number 14, because I think in all honesty, the rest of the questions stem from exploring that power dynamic a little bit more. I think that parenting is not easy. It's great fun. It's full of joy, but you kind of get into rhythms really, really quickly. And one of the things that I think, again, I want to help see is parents coached or supported in reflecting and interrupting some of those rhythms. I've got rhythms in my parenting that I'm like, flipping heck, how did that get there? That is not how I wanted to be a parent. But some rhythms are just pragmatic because I work and my wife works, and that's just the way it is. But other rhythms, well, actually, we still have control over those rhythms anyway. But actually, some of those rhythms really are. I'm really not very happy with that rhythm, but it's just there. And I think for me, the root of this question and then the others that follow from it is kind of just saying, giving your kid the chance to go, why do we do that? What's the story here? But by feeding back to you, can we not have an intense pre-game talk? So one of my children really loves to be everywhere on time. They really, by on time they mean 2 or 3 minutes early. I mean, if they join the military, that wouldn't surprise me, because I'd just like to be everywhere exactly on time.
It's Lombardi time in sport. It's called Lombardi. I've convinced Lombardi time.
Lombardi time, and so if we're rushing, that child tells us, when we rush, I don't feel like I'm in the right place.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's just about saying, look, this is a 10-year-old kid. Well, they were 10 at the time when we had this conversation. Why are we being unfair to them in the preparation of their sporting event, because we're okay with turning up late. In fact, we know that the rugby club he was playing for at the time, some of the other parents turned up late all the time. So we know the coaches set the meet time half an hour early, which is fascinating, isn't it? So the rest of the parents have to pay because the coaches haven't got the courage to sit down with the parents who are always late and kind of thrash it out and work out how to run it. But he knew the meet time, which meant he wanted to be there for that. And it kind of ruined part of his sports experience if that wasn't in the process. And so that's just one way from my own life. I hear lots of different stories, particularly about preparation routines, post-car journey routines. I spent some time with the England under-18 girls rugby team, and just listening to them talk about how after training camps their parents just wanted to grill them about everything, what the social thing, but they've just had a 4 or 5 day training camp with the national side. They are exhausted. They just want to sleep. And so the fact that parents understandably want to ask questions, but kids are just knackered and want to sleep, creates a tension that just doesn't need to be in the home. If the parents can hear the child go, actually, Mum and Dad, can we just not talk on the way home? I'm knackered. And that gives Mum and Dad to say, okay, no, I understand that, but I would like to kind of know what happened. So when is it okay for me? When can we sit down and talk about it? Now, if they're a teenager in the grunting stage, well, good luck at anywhere game. But but actually, just having that two-way conversation and negotiating that, I think is really, really important. For other children, it's about how much noise their parents make on the sideline. And I did a session with a rugby set of boys last week, in fact, and I asked the kids, what do your parents do that's unhelpful to your playing sport? And about half of them said they make too much noise, either in the car or on the sideline of the pitch. So just thought that was I'd love to have explored that, but it was a short session after a coaching session. It's just like, actually, for parents to hear that, that's quite painful. I mean, you've got to be an adult in having these conversations as a parent. You can't let yourself descend into childish teenage defensiveness. You've got to be able to hear it and work with it well. Or, as I do, when my kids say something rude to me, I talk about it on a podcast, or I go off and find somebody who I can have a mouth off, or my wife, or whatever, later. I can't believe they spoke to me like that. I'm really annoyed by it, but I need to think that through. But for the child, I need to let them own that voice.
Really interesting. And what I want to ask you is there a tension there? And this is the challenge. In as much as reflecting on a couple of things you said there. Firstly, well, perhaps the England women's under-18 side, they said, well, we come back from camp and Mum, Dad, they want to talk about it and we don't want to talk about it, we're tired. And the parent might think, well, hang on a minute. You don't know what it's like out, and I'm just giving you an example here. You don't know what it's like out in the world of work. Sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do, and I have to do things I don't want to do, and I want to know, I've given you this lift, etc., etc. And there's this element of helping your child, and it's under 18s. You were specifically talking about, so it's an older child, but
that's a good point.
A young adult, but maybe a parent says, yeah, but hang on a minute, Rich, we're also here to help children understand that they can't always get what they want, or they can't always adhere to how they feel, and so subsequently sometimes they need to know, well, I'm asking you the question, I'd appreciate an answer. What might be your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I have a lot of sympathy for that, but here's my view. Firstly, those children will have existed in that, you do as we say, for those 4 or 5 days in camp. It would have been great fun, but it would have been tough. They would have been put through a lot that they are mentally exhausted from being put through. Also, I'm really starting to talk about home being a harbour, not a harbour that, because you think about a harbour when boats need a bit of time to rest, recuperate, get the barnacles cleared off whatever they're going to port. It's a busy time. It's an active time. It's not just a moping around time. It's always, harbour is always, so I'm trying to cover this acronym. Home is a harbour, home is open and honest, home makes mistakes, and home expects progress. Home. So home expects the boat to go back out, and I think the role of the parents is primarily to be a harbour. Sports coaches, teachers, etc., I think will push those buttons harder. I'm not saying that means your kid gets away with blue murder at all, far from it, because some of the things I say is like kids should be doing their own prep. I still think that child, when they get out of the car, should be sorting their own kit out, and getting the dirty clothes in the washing up basket, joining straight back in with family routine, etc., etc. But I think primarily it seems to be particularly the elite end. Grassroots, I recognise it's different, but the elite end, it seems an incredibly stressful environment. I know that there are environments who are trying not to avoid that, but the whole selection, deselection, axe over your head all the time is incredible. You know more about that, particularly in the football world. And so I hear that, but my challenge to parents would be, look, can you be a harbour just for a bit of time? And I still think you can have that conversation that says, look, I understand in the journey on the way home it's not appropriate because you're knackered, but we have needs and you're part of a family, so we would like to hear about it. Or you negotiate that. Listen, you're knackered. When you get in the car, can we put a timer on for 10 minutes? Can we have 10 minutes or 5 minutes feedback? And then we won't bother you for the rest of the time. Or, and this is my cheeky way around it, if my kids won't talk to me, I get one of my siblings or their grandparents to ring. Because it's amazing how children will talk to siblings or grandparents more than they, to aunts and uncles and grandparents more than they'll talk to parents. So if you really want to know what's going on, just put grandma on the phone and sit in the background and listen, because kids will talk to grandma. So for me, I don't think that's unreasonable. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect an adult, particularly the under 18 age group, an adult interaction with your child as they try and negotiate the best way of feeding back. But I think home needs to be an emotional harbour from some of the significant challenges that go on in those camps. Not nasty. I mean, I'm sure some under 18 camps are nasty. England Rugby's under 18 girls camp was a brilliant environment, but it's still tiring and it's still stretching.
Absolutely. The next section, deepening the child-parent relationship. And I enjoyed some of these questions. I pinpointed, and you might want to come back at me with another question that you feel is more applicable, but actually I really like when would it be most helpful for you to take responsibility for your own sporting arrangements? So I suppose it's deepening the child-parent relationship, but it's also the parent actually helping the child become more autonomous for their actions and taking responsibility.
I mean, I think it's generally well accepted that parents are doing more for their kids than they could be doing. The kids could be doing for themselves. Unfortunately, there's, I think, some unhelpful caricatures and labels out there like snowplow parents, things like that. I'm really uncomfortable with those phrases for all sorts of reasons. But for me, this is about saying to the parent, look, when they were first born, you did everything. You don't need to do everything now. And how do we help them transition to that? Nor is it also about saying, you're old enough, you can do it all yourself, because they're still at home. You're still a parent, and I can't stand it when I hear people say we want to develop independent people. I want my children to be interdependent. I want my kids to be able to say to one another, listen, I've run out of time to do my rabbit this morning. Can you do my rabbit now, and I'll help you do this out later on. I want there to be negotiation. I want there to be cooperation. I want there to be an interworking with one another, teamwork. I want that to exist, and so I think parents get a great opportunity to model that at home. So I saw someone last week say, if you've ever filled your child's water bottle up for their sporting fixture, you're being a bad parent or something like that. It was literally what was being said. And I was like, that's absolute rubbish, because sometimes my kids come in from one club and go straight out to another, or we as parents have controlled the environment so they don't have any time to fill their own water bottle up. So we will help them get their water bottle ready. The extreme we don't want to get to is like some England under 18 camps in different sports have all said to me, please can you tell them parents to stop packing their kids' bags? And, that's just amusing, particularly in the rugby world, when you see these massive giants that are 18 and I'm just thinking, your mum and dad still pack your pants and socks for you. So it's helping kids kind of take a bit more ownership of that. It's developing those interdependent skills which require them to be an adult in that process. And I think that should start early. I certainly, my own personal belief would be any child over 11 should be packing their own sports kit if there's time for them to do it and it's available. I mean, maybe I'm a bit harsh, but in our household, my kids put their own clean clothes away. They just get piled up outside their bedroom door, and basically they're told until those clean clothes go away, we're not doing any more washing or ironing for you. You've got to take some ownership over your room and how that works. Equally, we also say the state of your room is up to you because it's your space, but we won't clean it if we can't get in there. And if you want a friend over and your room's a state, well, either they can't come over or they can't go in your room. So there are some there's some negotiated boundaries around that as well, because we want them to have a little bit of autonomy in that process. So for me, I think parents, again, just get into this habit of doing more for their kids than they need to be, which sometimes is okay, but the most of the time I think we need to be helping our kids get there. And what frightens me, Dan, is then they go into an elite sports context and they still have loads of stuff done for them by the elite sports context. So I think there's a real double standard being applied to parents in the elite sports world, because they'll go into a national camp and everything will be done for them. They don't even have to pick their plates up. Someone comes around the tables and picks their plates up, and they don't have to do any washing up, any food prep. They just put all their dirty laundry in a dirty laundry bag and it gets taken away. So actually, I think it's really important that parents help their kids take ownership, but I really do think the sports world, how they're just spoon feeding kids under 21 is just a little bit weird, if I was being honest.
Just a little bit weird. I think as you were speaking there, cognitive behavioural therapy, which talks about one form of maladaptive thinking being all or nothing thinking, and it made me chuckle there when you kind of refer to under 18 teams or organisations who say, can you please make sure parents don't do this? I think it was packing the bags. Make sure parents don't pack their child's bag. And as you're saying, we're so good, and organisations are so good at all or nothing thinking. It's just the new policy that comes out. This must be this way. It has to be that way. And I just think sometimes it happens because it's the easiest, simplest path to go down from a communication perspective, from a message perspective. And it's no, as you mentioned a few reasons as to why sometimes a parent might pack a child's bag, or might actually fill up their water bottle. It's just that all or nothing thinking. Just stop. And I think this whole conversation so far has been about adaptability and flexibility. That's such an important skill to have.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's one of the reasons why I rail against the snowplow parent label, because part of me is like, at what point is a parent a snowplow parent, and what point aren't they? Where on that spectrum do they cross over from helping their kid out because their kid's had a really awful day, and actually home is a harbour? So actually, sometimes, do you know what, I will slightly overparent my kids, because do you know what, actually, they've had a really awful day and they need a bit of an emotional hug. And they're only children. They're learning to regulate that themselves. Compared to, and don't get me wrong, I know some stereotypical snowplow parents who clear every obstacle. It does my head in. It really frustrates me. But they don't do it all the time. They don't do it 100% of the time. So at what point is it helpful or unhelpful? I would rather talk about behaviours and attitudes that are helpful and unhelpful, and how we ask these reflective questions. Right now, do I need to be doing this? Right now, do I not need to be doing this? I would much rather we saw behaviour on a spectrum and we saw behaviour and the individual as two separate things. A person isn't defined by their behaviour, and rather than name calling parents or this all or nothing approach that you're talking about, actually have a bit more sensitivity to the complexity and the different cogs that are turning within the wheels there, because it's so contextually relevant to how a parent behaves at different times in their child's life and development.
Moving on to the next section, enhancing sideline support, which you mentioned earlier, but just briefly focusing on one question which I really liked. What should I do if I'm feeling stressed on the sidelines? Which is a great question, because you're asking your child to brainstorm for you solutions to your stress, which actually might help you outside of the child-parent relationship in your workplace as well, because it's bound to happen whereby your child has a wonderful solution to the stress you're feeling in your life.
Well, yes. I think I was trying to model two things here. One is that I feel stressed. Yep. So, adults feel stressed. Adults don't walk on water. Adults aren't perfect. So dad feels stressed, and recognising this is a stressful environment at times for mum or for dad, and like you say, then just again the solution building, because children can sometimes say just absolutely the most brilliant thing that you hadn't thought of, but also I want kids to get that actually you don't have to be defined by the behaviour of stress. Stress doesn't have to equal certain outcomes in your life. You can problem solve around stress. Stress can be managed, and your response to that and emotions, whilst I may not be able to control that first wave of emotion, that kind of that that I don't know where that's come from, but as soon as you're aware of it, then you can start to influence it, work with it, however, take the strength from it, challenge the weakness, distract yourself, whatever, all the different things that you teach your athletes. But it's about, so I suppose in some ways it's about saying to the child, if you're feeling stressful today, how might you handle it? But actually I'm making myself the subject. So I'm getting the child to start to think about how they might manage stress and handle stress in that situation. But yes, I'm also hoping that kids give their adults some pretty cool solution building stuff around that as well.
Next section is big picture questions, and I picked out the question, who in your family are you most like? Who in your family are you most like? And I really like this because, as you mentioned earlier, that the book is about building character and helping children mediate their character traits, which we could all do with building that skill. Tell me a bit about that question.
Well, I think for me twofold, linking back to the conversation I think we had earlier, is that there aren't good or bad character traits. But I know as a parent, some of my character traits have probably turned up louder than others, and I don't want my kids to start feeling bad. I want there to be kind of conversation about that. I also want my children to start to recognise that your environment has an impact on you. So you might pick up character traits from family, but you go and work in an institution for 5 years or so, you'll start to pick up some character traits from that institution as well. And for me, it's not about saying who's the better parent. It's not about one-upmanship. And again, if a parents are separated, this question needs to be handled with grace. It's not a point scoring exercise. But actually, what it's doing is it's developing a level of self-awareness. Hopefully, it's having conversations. Say, "Oh, Dad, I'm a bit like you in this. How have you brought?" And then you can go, "Yeah, I am. Do you want to know how I brought the best in that out of that? Or do you want to know how that's helped me in my life and in my career?" So my middle child's really into drama, and she's just got no fear of being in front of people, and I have a similar kind of thing. I'm just quite. Whereas the other two would be nervous at standing up in front of a room full of people. I generally tend not to get that nervous about that. And so I just talked to Jess about how that's just a really good character trait. But what are the dangers of just being overconfident, Jess? I know that. Where do you think Dad's gone wrong with being overconfident? So for me, it's about how you help your child, again, start to see what it's like if it's turned down or what it's like if it's turned up too loud, and how that can help, and be a positive. Because my character traits are good, my wife's character traits are good, and they've really helped us become the people that we are. And I want our kids to see that actually it's good that you're unique like this, and you don't have to worry if you don't have the character trait that you see your friends have, because you really want that, but actually enjoy the ones you've got, and actually you can teach yourself to have others as well. I don't believe we're totally fixed either, so you can develop a skill set around. I'm not very organised, but running a business has taught me I've had to become organised. It's a skill set that I've worked in large organisations. I've had good people around me, and I've been able to get away with fluking it on not having a certain set of skill sets. But I can't now. I'm independent. I can't do that anymore. It's a skill set I've had to learn. Does it come naturally or comfortably to me? No, it doesn't. So that conversation can lead in all sorts of healthy ways about enjoying that. And I think you might want to say after that, great, how does that help your sport? How does that character trait help you be a good sportsman or woman? As the context here is sport, but you can talk about your career and all sorts of things. How's that going to help you in your career? Because all character traits will help people in their careers. So it's about, again, just helping people see, actually, I can do that, and I'm already equipped with a bunch of tools to move forward and make progress in this sport or in this career.
One of the world's preeminent researchers on personality science is a guy called Dan McAdams from Northwestern University, and what you've been speaking about there, I think he would use the term narrative identity, and from your teenage years upwards, you have this narrative in your mind that mediates your personality characteristics, that helps create your identity, and I love what you're saying there, because essentially if you can ask the kind of questions that helps young people, that helps children start to think about who they are, what they bring to the table, what perhaps they don't, or what's a challenge for them. A questions that help them look around their world and see the other personality characteristics of other people and how that helps them and how that might prohibit them or inhibit them. I just think those kind of questions are brilliant, just helping young people and children become inquisitive about personality characteristics, because when they do and they build that a narrative that helps them become more robust, more flexible. I mean, we've said this throughout the show so far. That flexibility piece is just so important.
Well, yeah, and also I don't know whether it's because I've dad of 3 kids, but I'd like to think that when my children get older and they start looking for a life partner or whatever, if that's the choice they want to make and have a life partner, that they're not looking at how big their bank balance is or their CV, that they're actually starting to think about character traits, because that's the person you have to live with, whether they've got a big house and lots of money or whether they're dirt poor. And I've taken enough funerals, I've had the privilege of taking enough funerals to realise that actually rich people can be very lonely at death and people have nothing to say about, and poor people, or I remember doing one funeral, it was literally just the widow, because they were so elderly, they'd lost contact with their friends, they'd not had any children, but the warmth with which she spoke about her husband and the character which he displayed, it just always blew my mind. This man was a rich man for having been in this relationship with this lady, and she was rich because of that relationship as well. But she never talked about their accolades or what they achieved in life. I had to drag that out of her because people like to hear that at funerals. But it was just like she just talked about the person, and that I tell my kids and try and say to parents as well. No one cares at the end of the day how many trophy cabinets you built for your child. They're just going to remember what you were like. They'll either tell stories about things you did because they don't know you well enough to say about what you were really like. I don't want people at my funeral to tell me stories about what I did. I'd rather they just talked about who I was, So, because then I think I've had more impact that way, basically.
Well said. Now, moving on, and the next section is giving a positive understanding of self. And I've picked out a couple of questions, completely biased here as a performance psychologist. I love your question of what would your top trumps card say? What would your top trumps card say? Because obviously it helps kids to reflect on what they're good at and what strengths they have, and you can have some fun giving yourself high marks out of 10 for what your top trumps card would say. And then I really liked, very in tune with the kind of things I might do with competitors at all levels, is 3 positive things about yourself that you could what are 3 positive things about yourself that you could repeat quietly just before kickoff. So a real giving a positive understanding of self. I mean, that has a sort of a whiff of well-being and welfare, but I picked out a couple of performance psychology questions there.
Well, the Top Trumps card is really, I quite enjoy that one. We've enjoyed Top Trumps as a family a lot. And the great thing about a Top Trumps card is you can then start talking about other players on the team and what would you need to make your team complete? What would other people's card? I mean, it goes off to all sorts of great questions. It also gets, so you've scored yourself 98 out of 100 on commitment. That's really interesting. Okay, so how might you get to 90 then? What might you need to do to get to 90 to make your top trump card even stronger on that area? So not only does it give that well-being, but you can then start to think about progression in that as well. And then I think that kind of pre-game chant is trying to get out of the car with your head in the space. That's like, actually, I can do stuff on this pitch. I can contribute today. But also honest ones as well. I don't know about you, but I'm sick of seeing kind of well-being gurus say you can do anything you want and be anyone you want, and that's because that's just rubbish, just an absolute rubbish. You cannot be anybody you want. And sometimes my kids come home from school and they have an assembly like that. What I want you to know is, what are you really good at, and where can you make progress? Because that is that's realistic. I want them getting out of the car, and I think again that links a little bit into parents just giving flattery praise. Oh, you're amazing, you're wonderful, you're brilliant, you're my special little cherub. Well, that in some ways that's nice, but it's not grounded. Why are they amazing? Why are they wonderful? Why are they brilliant? Why are they a special cherub? Well, they're special cherub because you created them. But the other 3, you're amazing because I really just enjoy being with you, and I enjoy the way you approach these challenges. Or I've really had a great day today because you just made me like the where they're good at, rather than just weird superlatives that just mean nothing and don't get anybody anywhere really. Working quite a deprived estate, it does make me annoyed when people go in and tell children you can go to university, you can go to Cambridge, you can go to Oxford. And some of the children can. I mean, I'm not discounting that for 1 second, but some children whose brains have been addled before they're born because their parents were alcoholics and things like that. There are unfortunately there are physical limitations to their ability to learn and grow and mature, and we're just lying to children. And I
I 100% agree with you, and you see this a lot in not so much my profession, but from dare I say this, motivational gurus who it's like we have a mutual friend in Stuart Armstrong, and with his podcast The Talent Equation, and he talks about having a war on drills, and I've started to have a mini war, not the same kind of war he has, but a mini war on coaches who say you can control your attitude, effort and energy. There's this big thing that emanates from a certain proportion of people, and I don't want to offend anybody who is listening in who says that, because I understand why you do, because it feels like something that one should say, especially at the adult elite level, for example, or in college, university sports. I understand that, but attitude, effort and energy are subject to biological predispositions, the environment that somebody grows up in or is experiencing right now, the whims of mood and motivation on a day-by-day basis. The problem with the message of you can control this, you can control that. Now, and as a psychologist, I talk about controlling the controllables. But I actually say, well, you can't control attitude, effort and energy. You can learn mental skills that are going to help you manage those things. And absolutely there is a time when maybe you're on the court or the pitch where, if we're talking about sport here and striving to achieve, that you should be in more control of those things. But demanding this divine elixir of incredible attitude, energy and effort in practice every single day actually prevents people from expressing and showing vulnerability, which gets in the way of relationships, whether it's a parent-child or a coach-child relationship, in my opinion. So it's hopefully I haven't gone on off on a complete tangent.
Well, I don't know. I think it's a great tangent. And it's one of my frustrations with what we're seeing in the way that sports institutions and coaches and are saying to parents about the way parents should be. Sports parents are always this. Good sports parents, excellent sports parents are always this. Bad sports parents do this. And again, and some of those things are controllables, and so that's fine. But a lot of them aren't controllables, or they're context situationally aware. And what we do, like you say, is when we make the pedestal far too high for people, then A, they discount our noise because it's just not great, or they feel guilt and shame that they're not those things. And I think in the parenting world, I come across a lot of parents who feel guilt and shame about how they've kind of done stuff. And so it's one of the reasons why I give parents a standing ovation. I'll get to give each other a standing ovation at the start of all of my sessions, because look, you've got your kid here. You didn't do it perfectly, but you got your kid here. Without you, they wouldn't have got here. But now let's just be realistic and let's talk about this, and let's try and find a space. And actually, launching in September, but it is available now. I'm launching an online Sport Parents Alliance, I'm calling it. It is a space for parents to be able to come where there won't be any of this. Your kid can be anything or do anything, or you as a parent better do X, Y, Z, because that's the only way to be. But it'll be a space where we can together start to explore what are our controllables, what can we have influence on, and how do we manage those bits that we don't have influence on? How do we handle that heartbreak of our child getting dropped? How do we handle our child's fear of that heartbreak? How do we handle the bits that we have no parent influence over? Because for parents, that's really weird. We can choose our kids' school, and we can choose kind of where we live to a certain extent, particularly those in elite sports, because they tend to be, not always, kind of middle upper classes. So we've already exerted a lot of control over our children, and then there's a selector with a clipboard, and we have no influence over that. And so how do we manage those genuine emotions? And just saying, I'll just concentrate on the fun, whilst that's true, it isn't helpful. and so I'm going to create this space, Sports Parents Alliance, where hopefully with input from myself, and I'd love to get you in there for an evening at some point, Dad, just so that we can start to be honest about this, vulnerable about it. I'm a big fan of Brené Brown's work on this area, and so we can learn to kind of just find a safe space, but a challenging space where we can stretch ourselves and move forward, but we don't have to pretend. We just don't have to pretend. That was a good tangent, but it was quite a long tangent from the question, wasn't it?
No, fantastic, and I'm conscious I could speak about this side of things, being involved with elite adult sports as I am, all day long. So we'll move swiftly along before we go down a rabbit hole. But next section, we've got 3 more sections, and we'll rifle through fairly quickly because I'm conscious of your time. But next section is nurturing a great team member, and I love this question: how can you make the other team members feel valued? And I just think it's a wonderful way to help a child start to think about others on their team, because so often, and understandably so, they're just focusing on their performance or being judged themselves, and it's so easy to become quite insular within the sporting world in that respect.
Totally. And also it's a little bit of a challenge to parents who, when they see 11 children play or 9 children play or 15 children, depending on the sport, they can tend to just be focused on little Johnny and not on and celebrating and enjoying the other children as well. And I think there's nothing more powerful than another parent coming up to your child and saying, I noticed you did that today. That was really, really good. So in some ways, there's a little bit of kind of reverse psychology on the parents as well, helping the parents to. But yeah, how good leaders make people feel valued around them. I don't know if my children will be good leaders, but they will end up being, good leaders as in whether they have appointments or roles in life that are high leadership, but they will all land up being leaders regardless, because we all land up with leadership roles in life, no matter how big or small. I want them to be good leaders. And I recognise the teams that I've enjoyed most being in and I've been most stretched in are where somebody has started a day by giving me a high five, giving me some encouragement. They might have stretched me, they might have pushed me beyond where I thought I could go. They started off by valuing me, and I think if our children are gonna value those people around them, particularly again in high pressure environments where selection and competition winning and things like that, particularly as they get older, becomes more important. Learning how to be competitive, that's a really important skill. Learning how to win or lose, those are really important skills. But that means someone on their team they might perceive as let them down. They might perceive that someone on the team is the weak link, and I think it's about them kind of resisting the urge to express that and actually start to see the benefit of those on their team and around them.
Absolutely. And the next section is building self-awareness, self-skills. So important in life as they are in sport. But I picked out the question, what will make me proud of you today? What will make me proud of you today? Tell us a little bit about that question.
Well, I think there's a real danger in parenting that we end up just expressing pride when there's a trophy or a certificate attached to it. And for me, I'm trying to help say to parents, can we express pride on the way and in the car? And also, it's really fascinating for children to say to their parents, I think you only value me when I do X, Y, and Z. I think most parents might be a little bit shocked by some of the answers, or a little bit like, oh no, well, I do like you when you do that, but you don't just have to do that to get my pride. And so I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had around there. And if they say winning or scoring or doing the best thing, then am I going to be comfortable with those answers as a parent? You know what? So I asked one of my children recently, and I was blown away. And they don't always answer like this. And I am a non-perfect dad, but they just said, if I go and be myself, Dad. I was like, yes, brilliant. So I mean, you can't go and be anything other than yourself, but of course you can't actually do that. But at least I want you to go and feel comfortable about being yourself. Yes, that would make me proud. That you go and be yourself, darling, and try and grow in that environment. So I think, yes, it's about trying to reframe what makes us proud of people. I mean, you look at the narrative around sports stars. If we exit a competition, and a sporting competition at a certain phase, we're not proud of our sports stars. So while we're talking right now, the England women's football team have just made it into the latter stages of the World Cup, which is brilliant. By the time this is finished, we may have won it. We may have gone out
Yes.
in the quarterfinals. Yeah. But again, interesting reading the page this morning of the narrative of they seem to have made us proud because they made the quarterfinals. That's a really weird thing, isn't it? Have they not already made us proud by representing their country in a certain way, functioning as a team in a certain way, playing with a certain attitude? It's a bit weird, really, if you ask me. And that seeps down into youth sport massively.
We just don't live in that society, do we? We just live in an outcome-driven society, and I don't know if that's going to be changing too quickly.
No, I don't. I don't think it is, but one little question in my book might chip away at the ice wall.
Small steps, Richard. Small steps.
Small steps. Yeah, totally.
And I think related to that question of what will make me proud of you today was the question I picked from your the last section, questions to pose on the way home, which is, what did you learn about yourself today? Which again, I think is a fantastic question.
Well, I think one of the things that shocks me, and I ask this question loads to kids because I see lots of kids in schools, whether with Church Minister hat on, and the fact that kids actually aren't that reflective about how they have engaged with their day. I mean, look, they're kids and their minds have got 15 things and they're worried about playing or whatever, but just that ability to pause. I mean, I love John Fletcher's one, which says, what was the best question you asked today? Kids can't even remember any questions they asked that day, let alone... especially after that day. So I think for me, it's about getting kids to stop and start to reflect on how they interacted with their day. What did they take ownership of? What did they not take ownership of? And how has that stretched them? How has that encouraged them? How are they going to remember this encounter with sport? And I think, again, narrative is so important, isn't it? Storytelling is so important. I mean, one of the other questions is post-match interview, which is kind of a bit similar, and you can probably draw the same kind of conclusions out there. It's about just getting them to be able to share that story of, I did this today and this happened, and I learned this. Is just such an important, that self-reflective, self-analytical. Well, listen, we've both worked with adults, haven't we, who don't have the capacity to go into a meeting and reflect on how they behaved in the last meeting and the impact of how they behaved in the last meeting on themselves and on the others around them. And so they'll go back into the meeting and behave in exactly the same way. And we've talked a lot about power and they will exert that power in a really unhealthy way. And it often amuses me, particularly on Twitter, and you're most definitely not in this category, how many people go on about emotional intelligence so unemotionally intelligently, in the way in which they are, and in the way in which they argue with people. And part of me just want to say, how have you learned about yourself on the way you've interacted on Twitter today? So it's trying to get that, not guilt tripping, hopefully it's some positive stuff, as well as some challenging stuff, and just trying to hold that balance.
Yeah.
So, Dan, let me ask you one question before we finish. Then you work with seniors. What do you hear from senior elite athletes about their parents? What are you hearing is good? Because most senior elite athletes, when they get interviewed, thank their mum and dad or their parents or their family. So what are you seeing senior elite athletes struggle with that family interaction, and where are you seeing it work really well?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think. And I would be 100% honest and hold my hands up and say it's not always something, a question I've asked, or it's my consultancy practice hasn't always gone there or hasn't been able to go there. However, when it has, and when conversation has turned to parents through interest or through necessity, I think identity often comes up for me as a theme, in as much as, and I'm obviously you use the term senior, adult elite level sport, that often the complaints, if that's the right term, or the concern from the athlete, him or herself, is, well, I'm seen as the footballer, the rugby player, the international gymnast, or whoever it might be, rather than, or as opposed to, or less so, the son or the daughter, the brother, the sister, the friend, and often I'd say, Richard. Now, let's kind of semi-part that, but related to that is often that stems from language and conversation with a parent, and the parent is doing it out of love, perhaps is misguided, so invested in their child, who's now an adult, their career, so invested in how well they do as a footballer or a rugby player or an athlete or whatever they're competing in. They're so invested that all the conversation, all the questions revolve around that, and often it's the conversations I have is helping that footballer, rugby player have a conversation with their parent around, well, can we talk about other things? Can we? the door
I
to
love
the
it.
sun, etc. So I think that's one thing that really springs to mind when you ask me that.
Yeah, and do you know what? There's something that echoes in some of the presentation sessions I do. I say it's really, really important you have meals where you ban conversation about the sport or whatever, even if it's just parents banning the conversation. The child brings out that's slightly different, but just banning that. And for me, I think elite sports academies could be doing more for this. I think that if they have a training session every week or several training, in the football world, they're there 3 or 4 times. I think kids families should be given family pass days where the families can have a day off training to go to grandma's 90th or to just go out and have a day at the theme park, because it's so diary all consuming. And I think sports clubs could really be helping families get the message across you're getting by showing where their athletes have got other potential. So I met a lad the other day who's like a grade 8 trombonist, and he plays at a Premiership academy. And why has this never been celebrated publicly, or at least does anybody ever know this? No, it's like what? How does so? This lad is a trombonist and a rugby player, but this context is only a rugby player. And I think sports clubs could do better at celebrating those stories, and could do better at saying to families, every child gets a family pass every term or whatever, and you use that whenever you want, or whether it's game day or training day, and you go and you have a quality day as a family, because we know that in childhood those are limited. We know when they're adults, Christmas will be dictated to by Olympic Games patterns or Premiership games and things like that. We know you won't have that opportunity, and stop with this foolishness of, because a coach was complaining to me the other day, oh yeah, family had booked a holiday and they didn't check the dates about when our training camp is on, and do they not want it enough? And part of me was like, but you don't know what's going on in the office of those parents. That might be the only time. They might have the most awful boss in the world ever. That was the only family holiday. What you saying? They don't take a family holiday so they can come to your training camp because they may be one of the 1% out of your system who makes it. So again, it's a bit of a weird mentality if you ask me. I'm not saying that everybody gets to throw a family card every week, but I just think we could be doing more for parents to help them communicate that as well.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Now, Richard, that was a fantastic conversation.
Thanks, mate.
And I know the audience will have enjoyed that, and I know it will tap into their interest in getting in contact with you, following you, potentially purchasing one of your books, Conversations for the Journey. So tell us, how can people follow you, get in touch, and or purchase a book?
Well, if you go to www.nonperfectdad, so there's a hyphen between non and perfect, nonperfectdad.co.uk/SPS for the Sports Psychology Show. I'll put some notes in there about who I am, and also some discounted links to get the book. If you bother to give us an hour of your time to listen to us to talk along, and I've really enjoyed the conversation, but I think the least we can do is give people a bit of a discount, and I'll put a link in there to the Sports Parents Alliance as well, and how they can get in touch. And if they're in part of an environment and they would love to think a little bit deeper about their parent engagement strategy, because we've touched on that in different ways today, then whether it's via Skype or me coming in the flesh, I'd love to come and see those environments and give them a bit of commentary and ask some questions about how they might develop that.
And have you got a Twitter handle?
Oh yes, at nonperfectdad.
Nonperfectdad. Brilliant. Perfect. Well, look, no, you're welcome, and thank you so much for coming on, taking the time, and thank you so much for offering the Sports Psych Show audience a discount to the book. I've really enjoyed reading it. It's something I'm going to dip into all the time. And as I mentioned earlier, not least because it helps sharpen that question-making sword. So I think that's such an important skill for anybody who's a coach, a parent, a psychologist, of course. So that was brilliant. No, look, thank you so much, Richard, for coming on. And I really enjoyed that, and I'd love to hear what you, the listener, thinks. So please do get in touch, whether it's via Twitter, my handle is at DanAbraham77, or whether it's through my website, danabrahams.com, to tell me what you think about the Sports Psych Show. You might have a suggestion related to future guests, or anything like that. Please do get in touch and let me know. Well, I'm really looking forward to next week's episode. Bye for now.